It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all.
Craig, there has been an enormous amount of response to some of the Trump initiatives regarding the DOGE actions. Most of them are winding up in court. But the question that I'm asking both of you today is the judicial branch strong enough to fight off what is clearly an effort to control the federal government?
Well, a very good question, and I will start by saying I am not a lawyer, but I believe we're seeing some signs that the judicial system is going to provide some guardrails. And I say that not so much because of DOGE, although a lot of the actions that are announced with great fanfare around DOGE then get either held up or paused or are actually reversed and people ordered to be hired back. So that's a mixed bag. I think the most interesting situation right now is this one involving the deportation of Venezuelans to El Salvador, because you have the Justice Department and the White House attacking a judge who said, "Wait, don't let the planes take off until we can figure out, just what the situation is among those people on the planes." By the way, over 200 supposed Venezuelans who had been swept up are being sent back to El Salvador. What's interesting to me about this, and I'm really just beginning to understand it, is that once again in the news you have President Trump blasting this sort of lunatic left fringe judge that he says has no business trying to subvert his desires. So here's the interesting thing: the judge that he says who's an Obama liberal was actually appointed to the Superior Court by President George W. Bush. That's after he'd been a homicide prosecutor in the District of Columbia. He spent some time in private practice. President Bush appoints him to the bench. It's true that Obama raised him to the federal bench, but for 14 years, this judge has been a judge on a federal judge. And he's hardly a person unknown to Donald Trump or those around him. Why is that? Well, because he was involved in some of the secret grand jury disputes that were part of the Trump-Russia investigations. He is the judge who said that Vice President Pence had to testify. He's been the judge who's actually looked at dozens and dozens of cases involving the January 6th rioters and said that this was not some sort of peaceful protest. This was a riot that began at based on what President Trump had said. So they know exactly who this judge is. I think they're not going after him nearly as much for the question of whether they can deport Venezuelans as they are for his past actions that offend Trump. Actually, indeed, Trump, in one of his overnight statements, said that this was just one more judge that a liberal judge he's forced to go waste his time in front of. Well, by the way, the other judges, he was in front of them because grand juries indicted him for committing felonies. And that's why he was in court. That's why he was before those judges. But think about this. There are lawyers for 5. I think there's over 200, about 270 people who were deported this past weekend on these flights into El Salvador. About 5 of them have attorneys because they claim, the 5, that they're not actually part of any Venezuelan gang, and that they feared they would be wrongly deported as gang members when they're not gang members. Who knows what they are? I don't know. But the judge says we need to find out, tells the government not to let the planes fly on Saturday morning. The Justice Department lawyer who was before the judge said he didn't know what the situation was. Well, in fact, minutes after that, planes took off. And then the judge was told the planes had taken off. by the attorneys for the 5 Venezuelans, and the judge told them to turn the planes around. Now the government argues, well, that was a oral directive, and that it had no standing. It had to be written. And eventually, it was written, by the way. And so you have this back and forth. At no point in time did the 236 or did the 5 in question pose a risk to Americans. They were all incarcerated. You know, the judge just wanted to know what the process was for determining these 5 were in fact members of a gang. So I think you have a very tough judge, very experienced judge. The government, at best, misrepresenting what they knew and when they knew it, and maybe worse. And then you have, within less than 4 hours after Trump's message about impeaching a judge, in this case, this judge who's involved in this case, less than 4 hours later, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court says that's not the approach we use to challenge decisions by judges. There's an appeals process. Extraordinarily rare for the Chief Justice, a very measured individual, to 4 hours after a tweet, basically, come out and hand President Trump a little, instructional notion, don't go there. So I don't know where it's going to end, but I do think that in this case, the judicial system is pushing back. And one last point. It's coming at a time when the support for what Trump does is reaching all-time low. Now, I get messages from viewers that say, how can you say that? You don't understand what's going on in the country. Well, here's the thing. The recent polling says that looking back over about 100-some years, there's only been 2 times when a president has a negative approval rating at this time in their presidency. 2 times. The first time was Trump in 2017, and the second time is now 2025. So it's been Trump twice, and the reason is that on everything other than immigration, on all the other important issues, Trump is getting a negative rating. The combination of challenging the courts, challenging the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and having these negative ratings have got to frighten even my friendly Republicans in Congress, because this is not a path towards success this year or next year. So we'll see. But I do think this is a case to really watch, and it's one in which the Trump administration may just have tried to cross the bridge too far.
Al, I guess the other issue is that this is not going to stop the Trump administration for testing those boundaries, right? This is not going to be the last of these outrageous acts.
Well, the question you asked, I think, is the fundamental question that we have to answer for our democracy. Can the court stop Donald Trump? Trump says he'll abide by court decisions and just appeal them, all the while he's ignoring them. And we really don't know what he's doing. The court says rehire these people. They're really being rehired. We have no idea. Donald Trump has never been known for telling the truth. So when he says he's going to follow court orders, you got to take that with a grain of salt. But the seriousness of this is incredible. Our system was set up so that the executive is the executive and not the autocrat or the king. And in order to do that, we have 2 sets of checks and balances. One institution to check it is the Congress. And with the Republicans in control of the Congress, they have been very timid in their willingness to correct. I'd say they haven't done anything at all. Just gone along with whatever he wants. And then you have the courts, and the courts have stepped up. But how do the courts enforce their actions? That's really the question. Mm-hmm. Are they going to arm the bailiffs and the U.S. Marshals and take on the military, which the Trump administration has? I mean, Trump just defied Judge Boasberg's ruling. There's no question about it. He said 2 of the 3 planes were already up. Well, the third one could have been held. If the other 2 could have been turned around. I do believe we probably have communications with those airplanes. But they just, and Trump is is sort of the, at least in public statements about accepting court decisions, is probably the most moderate person in his administration. And he wants to impeach the judges. Look, this is a really serious problem. Probably in the end, it all comes down to whether Trump has any iota of a belief in the rule of law. I mean, he is in a very powerful position. He controls all the levers of the executive branch, including the military, including the intelligence agencies, all our national security system. And if he decides he wants to go one way, who's going to stop him? When we used to have those fights with Richard Nixon over impoundment, Sam Ervin used to say, what are we going to do if he defies this? We don't have a jail in the basement of the Congress anymore. And that is, to me, that's a very, very serious problem. And if you look at Trump's track record so far, he basically ignores the rule of law. He has ignored the Congress. Will the court stop him? They may render decisions that stop him, but the question of whether they'll stop him is whether those decisions can be enforced, and that may depend in the end on whether Trump is willing to allow them to be enforced.
Craig, I'd like to change the subject a little bit. One thing that Donald Trump did do, which is getting some very positive responses, is the full release without the redactions of the JFK papers that the federal government has been holding off on. And I don't know how you all have read the morning papers on that story, but I got the sense that we're at the end of this conspiracy theory with the overwhelming evidence that one person shot the former president. And I, like many people, believe that JFK conspiracy theory impacted a whole generation of voters and people mistrusting government. Do you have any obituary comments about this chapter in American politics?
It is one of those moments when at least people of my age remember where they were. I was in grade school, and I happened to be home sick watching television when the assassination occurred, and it's seared in your memory, and it's kind of inexplicable because of the degree of difficulty of the shot that was involved. And so I don't know that the conspiracy theories will ever really end, even with this documentation out there. What we seem to have learned over time, at least, and I'm not a student of this, but what we seem to have learned is that it was very complicated. The Kennedy administration was going after Castro. It would appear that there were efforts to assassinate Castro. It may have been that the Cubans were involved. It may have been Russians were involved. At the end of the day, it does look like one individual was involved, at least from where I stand. But I just don't think the conspiracy theories are going to go away. And I didn't see anything leaping out in the headlines that was, suddenly a new piece of information that made it all make sense. It's kind of, as you suggest, confirmation that we are where we are and there's not much more to be learned. But, the fact that there's not much more to be learned doesn't mean people surrender their ideas, far-fetched as some of them might be.
Al, you have the final word.
Well, I can't imagine that no matter what comes out in those files, and like Craig, I don't see anything that changes anything that that we've known for the last 50 years. But I can't imagine anything that would come out in those files that would make Trump less of a conspiracy theorist. I just don't believe that all of the QAnon conspiracies sprung from the JFK assassination. All the right-wing stuff that Trump believes, he's going to continue to believe it. He just gets fetishes with things, and somehow this releasing all the documents on JFK is one of those. I don't think it's the thought of a conspiracy to kill JFK that was responsible for the sort of lack in for the declining trust to government. I think it was inflation, the double-digit inflation of the late 60s and 70s. It was certainly the war in Vietnam, which has been followed by other wars of questionable value. In terms of really changing very much, I don't think the release of the documents of on JFK's assassinations are going to change very many beliefs about anything.
Well, we have to leave it there. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thanks so much indeed. We will see you next week.